Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends?
Not the
But more importantly,
anime
they had the
eyes
same enemies, and they
on
started to
Italy and Germany, bro. What is this? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube. The name's Cielwave. You can call me Ciel, Tiger Vtuber reaching for the sky. Today we're trying something new by reacting to OverSimplified. Not a huge history nerd, but I do have some random bits of knowledge I've acquired over the years, so I thought this could be a fun way to learn some more details about history. Let's get right into the video. All right, OverSimplified. Let's see what we've got in store for us. World War II.
It's 1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy
we're starting
to
with
Switzerland
Mussolini.
to avoid
Okay.
military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets
As
arrested,
expected.
sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again,
Why did they just set him free when he went back to Italy? What happened?
goes back to Italy again,
Okay.
completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist.
Bro saw what becoming a teacher was like and was like, I'm not dealing with these kids for the rest of my life. I'd rather be a politician.
His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution.
Why is France
everywhere.
listed as a European monarchy? Hold on, is Germany even still a European monarchy at this point? Or when he say monarchy, do they just mean like not socialist? I don't know.
And suddenly he was pro-war, but his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what? I'm done with socialism.
Okay.
We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us
Alright.
apart,
What
but
is he
based
thinking?
on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian people,
Whoa.
just like the days of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's the, like a fucking dreams of grandeur. What are we doing?
I'll call it fascismo, and
Wait! Is he the one that coined fascism? Okay, you're going to be embarrassed, or like secondhand embarrassed, or you're going to be confused as to how the hell I wouldn't know that. When it comes to France, we only really learn like the French side of things. So I imagine maybe Italian people get taught this, but in France, we do not learn that specifically. I don't think so, at least. Maybe the curriculum has changed since then, but like when I grew up and I learned about World War I, it was less about the things that brought it about, other than the murder of the Austro-Hungarian guy. Yeah, that guy.
it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you?
His barber's like, what the fuck is this nut job talking about?
Let's go with bold.
Oh my god. He actually turned himself bold.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support. In 1922, he went to the king and said, make me prime minister, or I'll make me prime minister. And the king said, you and what army? This army.
Oh.
Fair enough. Then he went about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up, Germany. Germany had been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all of this felt to Germans.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that was legit, but yeah, I guess it does add up to the fact that it probably felt horrible.
One up, but it helps you understand how all this felt to Germans. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved it. Hitler had been a soldier during World War I, and he was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party, and in 1923 attended a march on Munich with his boys. and then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac,
that is the part we get taught.
With himself at its center. Europe had fascist dictator number 2.
We don't get taught about Mussolini very much. I didn't know how he came about, but yeah, we do learn about how Hitler came around.
At its center, Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends?
Not the fucking anime eyes
enemies, and they
on Italy and Germany, bro. What is this?
To get along. Anyone else want to be friends? Franco? No? You good? I do. Who's that? It's Japan, and they've taken it.
Bro, like the fact that they allied with someone who's so far away in this context is so crazy to me.
For northern China. Let's rewind a bit. Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then
this reminds me of the video I watched on the history of Japan. Yeah, this is pretty much what happened.
Imposed a bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust. They also had no natural resources, so they decided to go get some. They went to war with China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea, and they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya.
You know,
So
I
Japan
actually
thought
did
things
not know
unfair.
about the part where other countries established spheres of influence in those countries. I knew about... Where's Portugal on this? Because I know that Portugal had territory there. But I didn't know about a bunch of other countries, and I only know about Portugal because there's like a city. I don't remember the name of it right now off the top of my head. That's like that was like an enclave that was Portuguese and that was returned to China in, was it 1999, 2000, later, 2010? I don't remember. I know it's like recent.
We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia. And then in an incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army, a bomb blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over. So here's the situation. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles, and now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army. The Allies did nothing. Then Hitler sent his army back into the demilitarized
That's the part to me that's insane. That like, because the writing was on the wall and nothing was really done to stop it.
Giving orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move on to step 2.
Like, why did... I don't understand this. I mean, I'm sure there's like a bunch of movies and stuff like that or documentaries that cover this part from the other perspectives, but like, I actually don't know. They don't mention the parts where we like kind of let it happen in history class, of course. They just say like, oh, big bad.
He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum, or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion of Europe would do, and he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, I want that thing, and the Allies would say, you can't have that thing. Okay, you can have that thing, but no more. I want that thing. And repeat. In 1938, Hitler's army marched into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom, this is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, look, we're going to give you what... Hang on, this meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too?
Nope.
Anyway, we're going to give you what you want. Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted and the continuation of world peace. And we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, as expected, unfortunately.
What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia.
Shocking.
You lied to me. What do you expect?
Yep.
I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone, Mussolini also wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself,
I just realized the subtitles I'm covering a little
isn't
bit.
there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal...
What the hell? Why are they moved all the way over
bows
there?
and arrows and wooden spears? Oh, there is? Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also
There you go. Let's put that up there.
Wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese, gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge. And the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China.
And they went further and further.
Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced through the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital.
I actually never knew how far Japan went into China during that time. It explains a lot of the animosity in that place.
King. It was here that saw the worst
in that region of the world.
Atrocities committed against the Chinese people.
Yeah, I know about that.
Back in Europe, Germany and Italy made their relationship
that part I learned about
official by signing the Pact of Steel.
From the internet mentioning how brutal it was.
The hated Polish corridor, splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down, and they warned him that an invasion of Poland would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts. So for now, he made an alliance with Stalin, saying, "How about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future."
Sorry, hold on, wait. Can you say that again? Confusing.
Good. This new alliance stunned the West. On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side. Then
that's crazy. I actually think Poland probably would have been better if it wasn't for the fact that they got fucking sandwiched.
Known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion into the Saarland, but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on from it. They still used horses, they dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio, orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which one air marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible.
They must have known it was not possible to stop this. I mean, okay, hindsight is 20/20, but it's crazy to me that they didn't see the writing on the wall, really.
So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then, the Soviet Union attacked Finland, so the Allies said, "How about we land troops in Norway and move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your airfields?" But Norway and Sweden still said no. So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat. After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly different approach to dealing with the Germans. Hitler's overall strategy was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the Phony War, the Allies had given Hitler time to prepare his forces.
So he amassed.
He was ready to attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses. The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming. But this time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve. Blitzkrieg. As the Germans advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies. Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty underdefended because they thought it was naturally impenetrable. Well, the Germans were about to penetrate it with everything they had. They smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed. The best of the Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too. But they managed to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk, with British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home.
I still haven't seen the movie. I've heard it's really, really good. I really need to watch it at some point.
With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans breezed
the more recent
through,
one,
taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that...
Admittedly, a big part of the reason this happened wasn't just the Blitzkrieg, but also the fact that a lot of the established power at the time in the country was a bunch of fucking... I mean, they were there for power, not for anything else. They were there for power, influence, money, anything you can think about, rather than to actually be I don't know, representing the country and its values.
With the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace. But quite annoyingly, it didn't. And he needed to secure the Western Front, so he tried to force them into submission with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies.
I will respect this a lot about the UK. People joke a lot about like France and the UK and how we shit on each other all the time, but I will say, at the end of the day, it feels like siblings, you know?
Making the UK's situation even worse.
Homies.
Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides. Hitler also hoped that the UK would...
I mean, yeah, it literally was kind of what happened. That part of the government was a bunch of traitors, really.
Wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this.
Yep, and then de Gaulle had to go out of his way to take all of that back from Vichy France.
By sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships. So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain.
Oh yeah, that was the attack that was covered in the recent movies that came out from France when it comes to de Gaulle specifically. They covered this attack and how it was perceived from the French side. It was perceived by a lot of the French military as like a betrayal by the UK and stuff like that. But the more pragmatic parts of the military at the time were very like aware of the fact that the UK kind of had no choice but to do this, or they would have been in trouble. Because if that part of the French Navy had participated in attacking the UK as well, it probably would have overwhelmed them.
Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of
I don't realize why I didn't put this a little more centered.
German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation. And it looked like Hitler's Great British Invasion was coming.
Jolly rotten.
Then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious, and he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attacks on civilian targets in London. Children were sent off to the countryside, away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize.
Balls of steel indeed.
Just a foot for now. Finally, the Luftwaffe sent one massive...
Very clever foreshadowing, I like that.
All-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed.
W to the RAF.
Continued for some time.
Big W to the RAF. All right, that was the first part. Now the second part. Let me move this up here. There we go. Part 2.
So what else is happening? Well, when I said Britain was all alone, that wasn't entirely true.
Yeah,
many
obviously
Commonwealth
not.
nations and other allied colonies had joined the war in Britain's support.
I think it's easy for a lot of like history stuff to like summarize things to the major actors, but yeah, no, a lot of different places, a lot of different people. I mean, it's a world war, so obviously it involved a little bit of everyone from a little bit of everywhere from a little bit of everything.
Role throughout the war, particularly in the African and Italian campaigns.
Their participation.
On the Axis side, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the defensive tripartite pact, bringing their military alliance even closer together. The Soviet Union's war against Finland should have been an easy victory,
but they underestimated the Finnish
struggle, and their military ineptitude was put on full display. In the end, they did force the Finns to sue for peace. Then, they continued their honorable campaign of pushing around much smaller countries by annexing the Baltic states and part of northern Romania. France's colonies in equatorial Africa were like, heck no, we aren't going to join the Germans, and they all pledged their allegiance to free France, except for Gabon, which had to be taken by military force. The Allies also tried to capture the strategic port of Dakar, but that ended...
And again, it's one of those things that like French history classes do not talk about very much, but was covered in the movie that I watched recently about de Gaulle. I only watched the first part. I really need to go watch the second part. And it's really interesting because like it's often underrepresented how much the French African part of the nation, I guess, which, you know, colonies obviously, but a lot of them still shared in the values and I guess pride of those values as well. And they were the reason that like France had even a chance at having a resistance, as we called it.
Failure. Mussolini had seen Hitler's successes, and he thought now it was Italy's time to shine. So he tried to take British Somaliland, and that went pretty well. Then he tried to take Egypt, and that went less well. Then he tried to take Greece, and that went really badly. Churchill began referring to Italy as Europe's soft underbelly.
Ooh. Ooh. Damn.
He began
Big
a
Bird
military campaign from the south and started sending British troops to Greece. All of this had Hitler pretty concerned, and he moved to protect his southern flank. He had been getting friendly with Hungary and twisted their arm into signing the Tripartite Pact and joining the Axis powers. Romania was also eager to join for protection against the Soviet Union. The Tripartite Pact was designed to prevent any other countries from deciding to join the Allies, specifically Britain's old ally, the pesky United States of America. When war first broke out, American public opinion was strong.
Dude, I wonder how pissed off Hitler was because of Pearl Harbor.
Against joining in. In 1940, there was an election. The Republican candidate said, "I will not send any young Americans to die in Europe." And sitting President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "I will also not send any young Americans to die in Europe. Unless I have to, then I might." And Roosevelt won. Churchill asked him to join the war, but Roosevelt said, "No can do, Winston. But you know what? Here, have some weapons." America began supplying the Allies with food and munitions. But there was one problem. German U-boats were sinking thousands of Allied supply ships in the Atlantic, including American ones. If the Germans could sever Britain's supply line, the UK would starve. Throughout the war, the Allies had to come up with better technology to fight the U-boats. Improved radar, aircraft with longer range, better weaponry and convoy tactics. At one point, a man even called a meeting and said, "Pikecrete. You take some wood, you take some ice, you put them together, you get pikecrete." And then he pulled out a gun and shot some wood and it shattered. And then he shot some pikecrete and the bullet ricocheted off it and hit someone else in the conference room.
Oh!
Then they tried to make a pikecrete aircraft carrier, but that idea was scrapped.
Dude, I did not know about that. That's such a weird but cool bit of history. What the heck?
That's a really dumb idea. In the end,
I mean, it would be really dumb, but
codebreakers cracked Germany's Enigma code, and the U-boats gradually became less and less of a threat.
And that was the early days of computing as well, I feel like, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Kind of ish, I think. Sort of. Unless I'm stupid. But I think that's like a proto computing project, I think.
Back in Africa, Britain decided to push Italy out of Egypt. Hey, that was pretty easy, so they kept going. Hitler realized he was going to have to finally step in and do something. He went to Bulgaria and Yugoslavia and said, "Hey, I'm going to move troops through you to get to Greece, so either join us or, you know."
Honestly, thank the Lord, in a way, that Mussolini was a completely incompetent, military leader, because it made Hitler fuck up in so many ways.
Be invaded. Bulgaria opted to join them. Yugoslavia opted to be invaded. Then Greece finally fell to the joint German-Italian invasion. The British had moved troops from North Africa to fight in Greece, which helped Rommel and his tank divisions push the British back to Egypt. And they could have kept going, but a small, mostly Australian force held out under siege for 8 months in Tobruk, denying the Germans a strategic port city and disrupting their supply line. Despite having some...
I want to look into that, because I know that there's Tobruk, and I know about another one where, again, it was covered in the French movie about de Gaulle recently, where they held out for a very, very long time as British troops were removing themselves from a certain part. I don't remember exactly where anymore. The movie feels the memory is hazy right now. But yeah, it was really, really cool. I wonder if there is a movie on Tobruk as well.
Success in the Middle East, the British didn't seem like any real threat for now. Hey, Soviet Union, look out.
Surprise
With
invasion.
3 million troops, Hitler launched the largest ground invasion in history, and Stalin was far from ready. Both Churchill and Roosevelt had warned him of an impending attack, but he dug his head in the sand, and the Soviets didn't stand a chance. Germany made staggering progress, with huge encircling movements capturing mind-boggling numbers of Russian troops. 250,000 at Bialystok, Minsk, 300,000 at Smolensk, nearly 700,000 at Kiev, and again at Vyazma and Bryansk. Leningrad was put under a siege that would last an insufferable 4 years. The invasion of Russia had been Hitler's main ideological goal from the beginning, and his hatred for the ethnic peoples there was now unleashed in all its fury. The Eastern Front of the Second World War was brutal for all.
Wasn't it the worst front?
The Germans were now inside of Moscow, and that's it. It's all over. But then it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. Hitler had hoped the Soviets would give up before winter, but they kept fighting. His commanders came to him and said, "Can we please dig in for the winter and wait until spring?" "No. Keep going." "But oil is literally freezing inside our vehicles." "That's fine. Keep going." "We're having to leave the corpses of our frozen horses by the side of the road so we can still find our way in the snowdrift." "Perfectly normal. Keep going." Hitler hadn't given his millions of men winter clothing and supplies.
They were not ready for this shit.
Should have won by now. Then, Stalin called in troops from the Siberian front, specially trained to fight in the extreme cold, and the Germans were no match. They were now being pushed back. They had no choice but to dig in and wait for winter to end. Germany's victories were staggering, and Japan was eager not to miss the victory bus. Their war in China had come to a standstill, but they wanted to keep expanding their sphere of influence and getting those sweet, sweet raw materials. They began making plans to expand southward, but there was a problem. Southeast Asia was heavily colonized by America and Great Britain. It was also full of ocean. Ocean meant naval combat, and there was no way the Japanese Navy could stand up to the US and the UK. So they thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could destroy their navies before we begin our conquest? And so it was.
And so
on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese launched a surprise air raid on the US
touched
Pacific
the
fleet
boats.
at Pearl Harbor and inflicted a huge amount of damage.
They touched the boats.
They also attacked British colonies in Southeast Asia. Roosevelt
shouldn't
had no
have.
choice but to declare war on Japan, and so did Churchill. Hitler then declared war on America, even though he totally didn't have to. The attack on Pearl Harbor seemed like a big Japanese victory, but they didn't attack any of the naval repair yards, fuel storage tanks, or the submarine base, meaning the Pacific Fleet would be up and running again pretty soon. In the meantime, though, the Japanese were able to begin their conquest. They took Guam, the Gilbert Islands, Wake Island, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. They forced Thailand to join them so they could march their troops through to Malaya. They swept through Singapore, North Borneo, the East Indies, New Guinea,
Dude,
the
I had
Solomons,
no idea they got that close to Australia. What?
and they were now threatening northern Australia and the borders
I did not know that. That's crazy.
of India. Japan's victory had been as staggering as the Germans, and it reinforced the
I would
Japanese
argue
idea on
more
the borders of
staggering than
India.
the Germans
Japan's
at this
victory had
point.
been as
Because of the like actual sphere of influence that they captured through that, especially through the oceans. That's crazy.
staggering as the Germans, and it reinforced the Japanese idea that this was a divine war which they were destined to win. But their victories had been based on speed, not power, and power would eventually catch up with them.
Oh well.
For now, though, in all occupied nations, the people suffered. Persecution, forced labor, harsh punishments for any who spoke out against their occupiers.
Yeah.
In Europe, the Nazis were rounding up ethnic minorities and other unwanted groups and individuals. In particular, millions of Jewish people would suffer through the terrible events of the Holocaust. Brave resistance movements rose up in defiance of their invaders, while the people held out for hope. And hope was coming. Winter was over, and Hitler could continue his push eastward. But this time, he switched up his strategy. He wanted to focus on the south. His plan was to cut off the Russian armies in the Caucasus, an area full of oil, and then invade the Caucasus and take all the oil. His forces moved across the north with ease, and Hitler got cocky. He rerouted the 4th Panzer Army south early, leaving the 6th Army to complete the encircling movement alone. To do so, the 6th Army had to reach and take the key Soviet city of Stalingrad. The Russians defended it fiercely, and Stalingrad saw some of the harshest fighting of the entire war. The Soviets held up the German advance for 5 months as they battled in the war-torn city, which bought them valuable time. When the Germans had first launched their invasion a year earlier, the Soviets had moved their factories to the east. Those factories had been building a butt-ton of tanks and aircraft. And
impressive they managed to relocate their stuff that quickly.
Stalin gathered his new and improved forces around the city, and in an attack that resembled Hitler's own encirclement tactics, they began surrounding the 6th Army. Hitler's commanders came to him and said, "Hey, maybe we should retreat." But Hitler said, "No, you stay." The entire 6th Army was trapped and had to surrender. With complete air superiority, the Soviets started pushing westward. For Stalin, it was a resounding victory. For Hitler, an absolute catastrophe. Things also weren't looking too good for Hitler elsewhere. With America now in the war, Allied bombing over German cities reached devastating levels. In Africa, the British had pushed Rommel back again. Then they were pushed back again, and finally, after a decisive battle at El Alamein, and with American and British troops arriving in the west, the Germans and Italians were squeezed out of Africa. Japan was also already seeing its rapid success being turned around. They attempted to take the island of Midway, but the US Navy was ready for the attack, and they sank Japan's carrier. Actually, they sank a lot of them. It was a battle from which the Japanese Navy would never recover. British, Indian, and Chinese troops held the line in the harsh jungle terrain of Burma, and the Japanese suffered losses in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. They began to realize they were not invincible. With the Axis out of Africa, the Allies had to decide their next move. Churchill still wanted to attack from the south, while the Americans preferred a full sea invasion in northern France. "All right," said the Americans, "we'll do it your way." Allied forces successfully landed in Sicily and began moving north. They also carried out bombing raids over Rome. The thing was, many of the people in Sicily had relatives living in America, and they greeted the American troops quite warmly. With the war reaching home territory, most Italians just weren't that into it, and Mussolini was suddenly very unpopular. He was voted out by his own fascist Grand Council and was toppled from power. Italy immediately began negotiations for surrender. Hitler wasn't surprised and had already sent reinforcements southward. In an operation he ironically called Operation Axis, German troops quickly disarmed Italian troops in the north. The Allies continued fighting the Germans up through Italy, but then winter set in, meaning mud, and everything slowed to a halt. "All right," said the Americans, "let's do it our way."
It's so interesting because, like, Germany, dude, I feel like in nowadays winter, I might be crazy, but I feel like the winters are so mild over Europe now that it wouldn't really stop anything. I might be crazy, but it feels that way.
had made itself a lot of enemies, and millions of Allied troops had been gathering in England as factories worked around the clock producing the war material needed for a super crazy massive the likes of which the world has never seen before invasion of Europe. The Germans knew an Allied invasion would come, but they didn't know where it would land. Thanks to Allied deception tactics, they thought there was a pretty good chance it would come at Calais, but the Allies were really going to land in Normandy because it was less fortified and the beaches were nicer. Under the careful planning of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the invasion that had been long in the making was just about ready to go. Just one thing was preventing the launch.
What's crazy is that nowadays something like D-Day is literally impossible to reproduce because there's satellite technology. Like the fact that they were able to have it as like a surprise is the reason it worked at all. Nowadays it would be impossible because like you can't hide that size of a force doing what was done then in the circumstances that it was done, in the context that it was done. It's just not possible anymore.
The British weather. For a short while, everyone sat around waiting for a decent day, and then it came. On the night of June 5th, over 1,000 bombers took off and raided coastline defenses, while paratroopers were dropped inland in a bit of a chaotic operation, tasked with sabotaging defenses and capturing key bridges to stop any German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Early the next morning, the barrage came, as Allied ships fired a huge number of shells at the German fortifications, and then the landings. The Americans at Utah and Omaha, the British at Golden Sword, and the Canadians at Juneau. It was a tremendous struggle with a great loss of life, particularly at Omaha, but the Allied troops captured the beaches and the landings were a success. Then they began their movements inland. They took the port of Cherbourg and the city of Caen. The Americans moved south to capture Brittany. Then, in a massive disaster for the Germans, British and Canadian troops from the north and Americans from the south trapped the German 7th Army in a near wipeout encircling movement. In August, Allied troops landed in the south of France to little resistance. On one beach, all they found was a Frenchman handing out champagne. Paris was liberated, and the Germans were pushed out of France as the Allies entered Belgium.
That's so unbelievably French, dude.
Liberated, and the Germans were pushed out. On one beach, wipeout encircling.
What do you mean, dude?
In August, Allied troops landed in the south of France to little resistance. On one beach, all they found was a Frenchman handing out champagne.
That sounds like southern France. I'm not surprised.
Paris was liberated, and the Germans were pushed out of France as the Allies entered Belgium. In the Far East, the Allies started to push the Japanese out of Burma, as the Americans launched a two-pronged offensive in the Pacific. In the south, General MacArthur led the push to liberate the Philippines, while General Nimitz oversaw the brutal island-hopping campaign. American
That's crazy that they like
landing after hard-fought landing on
pushed them back from that much.
As they moved
then again, they kind of look at their navy wrecked.
The Japanese believed that the greatest thing a person could do was to die in battle, and the most dishonorable act was to surrender. As a result, they fought ferociously to the very end. And the closer the Americans got to the mainland, the more ferocious the resistance became. In February 1945, the Americans captured the island of Iwo Jima, and an intense firebombing campaign of Japan's wooden cities began. The Allies suffered some setbacks trying to liberate the Netherlands, but they were making progress and were now threatening the industrial
Gotta get the Dutch back.
Hitler's health, both mentally and physically, was rapidly deteriorating. Things were looking bad, and he was desperate. He said, "We need to turn this thing around, and I have just the trick. Remember a few years back when we blitzkrieged through the Ardennes and trapped the Allied forces in Belgium? Well, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Again." He gathered his forces and tried to pound them through the Ardennes. He used up the remainder of Germany's strength and resources, and he managed to create quite a nice bulge.
The Battle of the Bulge.
Forces in the Belgian town of Bastogne. The Germans sent the trapped Americans a message saying surrender or be annihilated. When it was read out to the commanding officer, he said, "They want to surrender? No, sir, they want us to surrender." Nuts! And that's what they sent off as their official reply.
Yeah, that sounds like the Americans, all right. They would do that. You know, there's many things that I will say that might be like, you know, joking about the Americans, but I will give them the fact that they would probably absolutely, in the face of utter and absolute annihilation, still think that they're going to fucking annihilate the enemy instead.
General Patton's Third Army then managed to break the siege from the southwest, and the Germans were pushed back. Hitler's last-ditch attempt had failed, and what followed was a total collapse of the German forces. The Allies pushed into Germany from both sides. The Soviet Union took Warsaw and kept pushing to Berlin. In his bunker, Hitler realized all hope was lost. Berlin fell, and with it, Hitler's dreams of a great German empire. Two of the Axis nations had been knocked out. One to go. The Americans began their assault on Okinawa, the last island before they would reach the Japanese mainland. The desperate Japanese fought hard, launching kamikaze attacks on the US ships. The citizens of Okinawa suffered through the terrible fighting, but in 2 months, the island was captured. The Allies now had to make a choice. Either continue the devastating struggle up the Japanese mainland, or they could try to coerce the Japanese into surrendering now. In July, the first successful atomic bomb test took place in New Mexico, and the destructive weapon was ready for use.
I saw Oppenheimer. I know where this is going.
Not so much liberating as occupying its captured territories. And so they wanted to put on a show of force. On August 6th, the A-bomb fell on Hiroshima. Then, on the 9th, Nagasaki. The cities were reduced to rubble, and for the people living there, it was a terrible fate. But for the Allies, it achieved their main aim. In September, the Emperor announced Japan's surrender, saying the war situation
Dude, it took an entire month. It took a month after the bombs for the surrender to happen. I actually didn't know it took that long. That's crazy.
Necessarily to Japan's advantage. After 6 years,
not necessarily to Japan's advantage is certainly a way to put that.
Over. The Allies occupied Japan for 8 years. The Emperor was allowed to keep his position, but General MacArthur made sure this picture was printed in the Japanese press to display to the Japanese people that their Emperor was not the divine, powerful being they had believed. Germany was divided between America, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union. In 1949, the Allied sectors were united into West Germany. The Second World War had been more terrible and destructive than the first. In its aftermath, two major superpowers with two very different ideologies had come out victorious, and the tension between the two of them would create a new kind of war.
The Cold War.
A very, very cold one.
Yep. I'll have to watch that as well. All right, and that was it for today's session of Oversimplified. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you on the other side. And that was Oversimplified's World War II series. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. It was honestly quite cool to get more than just the French history class perspective and get a broader understanding of the conflict. Let me know if you'd like me to react to more of their videos in the future, and if any in particular would be more interesting. If you enjoyed this video, it'd mean a lot if you gave it a like, comment what you'd like me to react to next, and subscribe to not miss out on any of my future uploads. If you're new here, make sure to drop by my streams as well on Twitch, link down below, for more reactions, gaming, yapping with me, and the occasional singing. I'd also like to thank my patrons for supporting this content, so thank you to Bad Guy EX and Lily Chaton. That's all I have for today, but you know me, it's never goodbye, no, it's always see you later.